Okay, so today we're going to deal with three variable substitution. And so as you can see in this, I don't just have an x and a y, but I also have this z term. So I have an x, a y, and a z. And I know this is going to be a substitution problem instead of an elimination problem, even though everything is all over the place, because I have a variable solved for. Z equals something. So this is how I know it's going to be substitution, because Z is solved for something, and I know it's three variables because I have three variables. Now this problem looks very confusing, and it's not easy, but it's not anything different than we've done before. The biggest thing that you have to realize for this is you want to, at the very beginning, decide what variable you want to get by itself, so that instead of having three variables in this equation down here, we just have one variable. And that variable I'm going to pick is x. I'm not going to pick z because z is solved for something. So any of the variables that are solved for you're not going to pick. But I'm going to try to get x all by itself out of the x, y, and z of my choices. So I'm going to pick x. So the first thing that I'm going to do is anywhere that I see a z, I kind of want to plug this thing in for it. Or anywhere I see a y, I want to be able to plug in y for something. So, because this thing has all three variables, I'm not going to touch this equation. I'm going to look at this equation right here, and I'm going to try to solve it for y, so that I can have an equation solved for y, and an equation solved for z, and so I'll just be left with x. So let's solve this equation right here for y at the bottom. So move this down just a little bit. So I have 3x minus 3y is equal to negative 6. Subtract 3x, subtract 3x. That'll give me negative 3y is equal to negative 3x minus 6. Divide by negative 3, divide by negative 3, divide by negative 3. Y equals x plus 2. Okay, so now I have an equation that is solved for y, an equation that is solved for z, and a 3 equation. So that equation that's solved for z, it has a variable other than x. It has a y variable. But I just found that y is equal to x minus 2. So I can take that y and plug it in, and now I won't have a y variable anymore. So let's go do that. So I have that z is equal to negative 3x minus 3y, but instead of writing y, I'm going to write what we found, which is x plus 2, plus 9. Now when I solve this, distribute, of z is equal to negative 3x minus 3x minus 6 plus 9, or that z is equal to negative 6x plus 3. So as you can see, I now have a y equation with only x's. I now have a z equation with only x's. So if I take this first equation and I plug in what I found for z, which is negative 6x plus 3. So if I plug this in for my z, I plug this in for my y, I will only have x's, which makes it easier to solve. So let's do that. And as you can see, this takes up a lot of space. So I would have negative 4x plus 5 times my y, which was x plus 2, minus 6 times my whoops, get that eraser, minus z, which we just found that z was 6x plus 3. And that's going to equal 8. I'm going to double check to make sure that equation is okay. Yep. So it was plus z, so I plugged in my negative 6 plus 3, good. And then 5y, so I plugged that in, okay. So I have this equation right here. So I have negative 4x plus 5x plus 10 minus 6x plus 3 is equal to 8. This would become 1x minus 6x plus 13 is equal to 8. Then I should get negative 5x, get the 13 to the other side, is equal to negative 5. So x is equal to 1. So now I found one variable. Finding the other two won't be too bad because we have the equations, because I have y equals x plus 2, and z equals negative 6x plus 3. So when I plug those two things in, I know that y would equal 3, and z would equal, well, negative 6 times 1 is negative 6 plus 3, be negative 3. And that is my final answer. Now I know this problem took almost 6 minutes to solve, and it has a lot of steps in it. But here's the first thing you need to remember, and it will make it a lot easier. You want to find a single variable. So you want to get rid of all other variables. The variable that you want to choose most times is the one that cannot be solved for. See how it would be very hard for me to solve for x in this case? Z is already solved for, so I can't choose that one. And y was very easy to get by itself or solve for, so not choosing y is pretty smart choice. Okay. So you get two variables solved for each other. You plug those things into your equation. You solve out that, you find what x is, then plug that in, find y, then plug that in and find z. That's how you do substitution.